Hey guys, how's it going? It's Samuel here with Yes Sports, here with a very special interview with Wardy, who is a very prominent StarCraft 2 tournament organizer and caster. How's it going, Wardy?
I'm good, man. Keeping busy and casting lots of games, so yeah, pretty good.
Yeah, you're casting you casted like every day this week, didn't you?
Yeah, I like to keep busy. That's when I work the best. So,
Okay, okay, makes sense. So, let's start from the beginning. How did you get into casting, and how did you know that it was like something you really wanted to do?
um, so I kind of got into casting by accident. I kind of started out just running events, especially for kind of like low-level players and stuff, and kind of had a community. And from there, I started to run events for them, and obviously from there, we were like, oh, you should cast them, and then that's something that I did, and then I eventually moved into just casting other events, and it's just something that I got better at over time and realized that, yeah, actually it was something I enjoyed doing and that I could actually make a good go of just continuing to kind of do that.
And who was it like at what point was it that you were like casting in the big tournaments? Like did somebody notice you or like what happened there?
Yeah, I don't know really. It was kind of a weird transition, I suppose, because I went full time and it felt like I was trying to like move up the ranks for a long time. And then I finally got to cast an IEM. And I actually think it was because a lot of the other casters actually recommended me, especially because they couldn't travel to this one. I believe it was in China, and a lot of people didn't want to go to China. They had a bad experience with it before and stuff. So they recommended me, and I was at least a name that was known about, I suppose. And so they gave me my shot, and then from there, I just continued to get some gigs. So that was back in 2017 or so.
Awesome, awesome. So I've noticed that in, recent years you've been running your like own personally branded events. Like you had the Caster Civil War, and like you have the Wardy Team League. Like what motivated you to do these things rather than just accept all these amazing invites that you were getting?
Yeah, I think it's just because that's what I grew up doing almost, because I started out with running events. So for me, a lot of the joy was running an event and seeing an event through and telling a story and just the whole process and I guess taking on the stress of it all as well. Um, so kind of that. Obviously it was kind of nice as well, just have a real solid baseline to work from as well. So I wasn't reliant on being hired for events because even though I got hired for that IEM, it then took, well, I think I got hired for like WCS at the very start of the next year, but then it was like a year and a half or 2 years until I got like another major event by like in the main system. I still got some other events that I got to travel to, which is awesome, but it definitely wasn't like the big shot events that a lot of people took notice of. So it was always good to have my own stuff as a kind of a just something to fall back to. And even now, right, if major events didn't happen, I feel comfortable because I still have like my own backup plan in place.
That makes sense. So how do you get like I know the Castle Silverware like had a pretty nice prize pool and there were like incentives along the way and such. Like how do you raise the money? And this is important because some of our listeners might be wondering like I want to get into esports, I want to be doing what you're doing, I want to be running my own events, but like it all goes back to money.
Yeah. Yeah, so when I first started out, it was very much a case of I was just like scrapping together anything I could. I was in university at the time, so I was like, not going out partying, so I could like put in some money for an event and stuff. And it was just building up slowly over time. And it's kind of a weird one because like I feel like esports nowadays, like running tournaments is not necessarily a moneymaker, right? Even in the biggest tournaments out there, it's a marketing device. So the tournaments cost money and they bring in marketing, they bring in advertising, right? But they don't necessarily always pay for themselves because they're meant to be used as an advertising tool. So I feel like what I have is very unique where because I can monetize my tournaments with my stream, I actually am in kind of a unique position where it's not necessarily just the tournament that's making money, it's me that's making money with the aid of the tournament, right? Like just me on my own, I definitely don't attract as much attention or as much viewership or as much support. But the tournament on its own on like a different stream also wouldn't kind of attract the same thing. So it's that sort of combination and building a community around that idea. So from there, it kind of is nice because I can, on my channel, I can run ads and I can sometimes take sponsorships, for example. I always guarantee that certain amount of money that anyone supports with goes into a tournament prize pool as well. So it's kind of that combined effect of having a community and being someone that people know they can support while also having the tournament as a way to kind of keep that going and to give something back to them as well.
Right. So what would you say like the percentage that you raised is like sourced from your stream and what percent is like sourced from sponsors?
Yeah, almost everything's from my stream. I think it's very rare to get a sponsor, and a lot of the sponsorships I do nowadays, especially, don't necessarily sponsor the tournament. They sponsor the stream, right? So, if I get sponsored by a game, I play the game on stream. I have the download link on stream. They don't necessarily want to link to just one tournament because for them, they just say, being linked to one tournament that lasts a week or something. Why do that when they could just let be on stream for everything for a month, for example? Um, so especially in the last few years, it's definitely been less of like sponsoring a tournament. Like we used to have that in the past, I think, a bit more, where people would come in, sponsor a tournament, and a few $100s, and maybe I'd buff up the prize pool or like double up the prize pool, so like be a big thing. And for me, it was just like a way to offset some of the costs, right?
Right.
But nowadays, especially, I think it's just so much more attractive and so much more comfortable as well for companies to sort of come in and say, hey, look, like we can sponsor a stream because we do that already, right? Whereas to convince them to sponsor a tournament is something that's like a whole new thing. It's hard to kind of tell them what they're going to get out of it. And maybe that's something I could do better as well if I proactively went out and looked at it more. But for me, it's better to just sell the stream than it is the tournament a lot of the time.
That makes sense. So, just a side flavor question. How many of those sponsors like they make you play games on streams? Like how many of those games do you actually play outside of the stream where you were like, "Oh man, this is great. I'm gonna keep doing it."
Yeah, you know what? Like, actually, a lot of the games I play, I really enjoy.
Oh, for
There's
real?
like, yeah, there's some that I'm like, I really love playing games, right? Like, I really do play a lot of different stuff when I have the time. And yeah, there's some of the mobile ones, especially where I'm a bit like, not for me. But there's been a couple of the mobile ones which I've gone really into as well. Um, Honestly, like, I love doing the sponsorships because to me, it's a cool way to find new games. But more importantly, I think it's a cool way for me to just get a chance to play games because I just struggle to find time to play games, and I've had games in the past where I've loved playing it on stream, and I got to do like 2 to 4 hours. I'm like, oh my God, I love it so much. I like buy the full edition or something, and I just never go back. I'm just terrible at playing games, as dumb as that sounds. And so for me, it's kind of like a really cool chance to actually play stuff and define games. Recently I got to do, for example, like Genshin Impact, and like that's a game I wanted to try for ages. I started out, I think I've done 4 hours on stream sponsored. I'm like, I really loved it. I could see myself getting like super addicted, like completely playing, the hell out of it and all of that. But then I come back to the kind of central point of like I just don't feel like I have the time to get involved in another game like that because I am a very busy person. I work a lot and I just don't have the time to kind of sink my teeth into games like that anymore. So it's kind of like a weird thing where actually I do like a lot of the games I play, and not every game's a hit, but yeah, I enjoy a lot of the games that I play. It's just kind of tough to find the time to keep playing them sometimes.
So when you say that your schedule is like crazy and busy, is it like do you have a day job or is it like full-time streaming and tournaments and what have you?
Yeah, I do this full time. I'd say my typical day, I wake up and probably spend about an hour doing admin work slash setting up for the day, scheduling stuff. Especially because it's not just like turn on my stream and streaming. I have to set up the tournaments, pay out players, for example, sort out sponsorship stuff for, and all of this sort of background stuff. I feel like there's definitely like a lot more behind the scenes stuff that I do. I don't really know what other streamers kind of experience with this is. I'm sure it's kind of similar, but I feel like I definitely take on an even bigger load with the tournament organizing aspect. And with that comes like a lot of scheduling, for example, as well, and working around other events. And that also brings a lot of stresses in the sense of like all of a sudden like having to like suddenly you just see an event get announced like that's right over the top of my event, and then all of a sudden you've got to completely reschedule something and do it as soon as possible because all the players have agreed to play and all of that sort of nonsense. So yeah, so I spend probably like an hour in the morning doing that, and then typically I aim to stream like 4 to 8 hours a day. Just sort of depending, but I also do that, or I aim to stream like 7 days a week a lot of the time. Um, Nowadays I don't stream as much. I live with my girlfriend now, and that's something which has definitely allowed me to kind of step away from work a little bit more. When you live alone, it was definitely a lot more easy to just kind of stay stuck in work a lot of the time. So more recently, I've kind of chilled out a bit, but yeah, I would say like easily every day I put in like 5 to 8, sometimes like 10 hours. It's not odd to have like a 10 to 12 hour stream as well, or just a 10 to 12 hour day where I'm log in, I'm here 10 to 12 hours, and then I finally kind of just go straight to bed.
So that's interesting. You mentioned that like you're on stream for so long sometimes, and I know that as a caster requires lots of energy and like viewer engagement. Like, how do you do that for 10 hours?
Yeah, it's something that I just kind of learned to do, I suppose, over a long time. Even just talking for that long is something which a lot of people I don't think could do, but it's just something I learned to do over like just doing it, I suppose. It's weird because especially casting, I feel like it's actually easier to do it as a solo caster than a duo caster, as long as you can handle the voice, because to me, in a way, it sounds kind of bad, right? But then I don't have to think as much because like I can just say my own thing. I don't have to work with someone else. I don't have to figure out the chemistry. I don't have to think about what they're saying almost. I can just say my piece. I can say my own opinions, and that's so much simpler and so much less work. I feel like if I co-cast with someone for like 5 hours, I am completely wiped. But I could probably solo cast for like 8 to 10 hours, and yeah, you'd be tired at the end, a bit worn out, but like keep it going. So there's definitely just a bit of stamina, kind of having practice doing it, but I think also just knowing what I can do. And a lot of people probably criticize my casting, saying, "Oh, he's boring, right? He doesn't have the energy, he doesn't like shout and scream all the time." But that's because I know I can't shout and scream for every single series, especially when a lot of the games you watch in a day necessarily aren't necessarily the best series you're ever going to see, right? So I think it's been very important to learn to be okay with being chill and then just bring it all when it really matters and, getting excited at the right times and, just telling the stories in the right way, I suppose.
That makes sense. So, one thing I've noticed with StarCraft, and I'm sure this applies to any game, but there are lots of people who try to do what you're doing,
Mhm.
and then like it might take 1 year, it might take 2 years, sometimes less, but they fall off. Like, if I list some examples, like, Acer tried something with the Acer Team Story Cup, and there was base trade TV for a while, but you never see them anymore. Like, what is it that you're doing right, and what was it that they did wrong?
Yeah, I think there's so many different things to it, right? I feel like I'm just very happy doing what I do. I don't feel a lot of burnout a lot of the time. I think I burned out a little bit earlier this year when I did the Cast of Civil War because that was such a huge task and I did so much for it. I think that was the first time in a long time I really kind of like burnt myself out a little bit.
It was a fun event, though.
Um,
I really
yeah,
like watching those.
yeah, it was amazing. I loved every single part of it. Just afterwards, I was like, man, I'm done for a while. And like, I just might, well, like the first time, like we always talk about like passion in StarCraft, right? And the first time in a long time, my passion was just gone for a little bit. I was just like, I just don't care about the games. I just need a break. And the thing is as well, it's like sometimes I've had this too, where it's like you take a break, and then because I take a break, when you come back, things start off slow, and that's demotivating as well. So then
Uh,
it's like, oh, you've got to have the motivation or the passion to get through the slow start again, right? I think that was something which I just wasn't really used to because the last 2 years, especially, have been a whirlwind of just, with COVID and everything, everything's been really good. So it was kind of weird to have like a down period and then come back to things not being really good. And that's something I definitely like had to work through a lot this year. But that's not the question he asked at all. So back to the question.
I
It's kind
interrupted
of,
you.
yeah, how did what I do work? I don't know, like I feel like I said, a lot of it is just because I still am very content with what I do. And I think I'm in a very unique position where I continue to like very few people kind of rise upwards to the very top anymore in StarCraft 2. And I think the time at which I did it was somewhat for like as the right place at the right time. I filled gaps that were needed. I was always kind of putting the tournaments in between the other tournaments. And in StarCraft 2 recently, especially, there's been a lot more gaps to fill, right? So that's definitely helped. And still being on that kind of projectile of growth has been really nice. And obviously for me, a lot of it's just personal growth as well, because I can look at it and say, oh, my stream numbers are up, or my stream's growing in general. I feel good about this event that I ran, or we were able to put on a bigger event than usual. So for me, it's obviously that's kind of numbers based, but I don't have like the pressure of sponsors or someone to report to. I'm like, hey, look, we got to put like, for me, if something slows down, just like, oh, hey guys, this week we can't run the tournament as big. We have to run a smaller event or something, and just build back up. So I think, for the Acer team stories and all that kind of stuff, that's probably why they fizzled out because they just have to show success that they couldn't find. There was a lot more pressure on them to do that. And I think that's also part of how it's kind of good that I kind of get to do it on my own stream because again, like my stream is just like a hub. And if you try and jump into something like StarCraft on a new stream, it doesn't matter what you run, it's so difficult to get people to a new stream. I think TSL has seen this where despite TSL being a really hyped event and a really exciting event, it's always struggled a bit for viewership. And it's just because people it happens so few times, and it happened out of nowhere. People don't know where to go. It doesn't matter how much you advertise, you try to tell them, people will say, "Oh, I had no idea that existed," right? So just being able to have like a centralized hub is somewhere where, or is something which I think helps a lot because people just know they can go to my stream and find StarCraft tournaments, right? So that definitely I think was a big part in being successful. And that's obviously something that Base Trade TV had as well. And I think for Base Trade, it was definitely just a case of burnout. I know Rifkin was very much so a case of just he'd done it for a long time. He was kind of sick of doing it in a lot of ways and just felt like the work he was putting in wasn't worth what he was getting out anymore. And I know he's pretty happy doing what he does nowadays. So I think it was just that. And I sure if I wasn't around running tournaments, someone else who steps up and builds big tournaments would fill that role because it is a role that needs filling in our community. Like our game needs those tournaments in between all the other tournaments.
What is it that Rifkin's doing now?
He's just a full-time variety streamer. He did a lot of Among Us when Among Us kicked off.
Oh,
So
okay.
he did a lot of that. He got made a very good group of friends, and I'd say he's a variety stream that works well in like I guess like those kind of multiplayer based games. Like he plays a lot of Rust, for example. I know like Minecraft, that sort of stuff. So yeah, he does a lot of that, and he's doing really well for himself. Like his numbers aren't what they used to be, especially viewership wise, but it's one of those kind of crazy things where it's like even though his viewership is like maybe 10% or less of what it was, his support is still there, and I think that's one of the cool things as well. And one of the cool differences in kind of how streams work differently because he went from being this hub of like tournaments and somewhere people could go to watch tournaments to being a streamer, which is being about being himself and being him, right? And people support that to different extents and in different ways.
So, with StarCraft as a player, I remember this one time. I went to that. If you remember Penguin,
Yeah.
he convinced me to go to that. Actually, speaking of Rifkin, it was a base trade event in Vancouver.
Hmm.
And I remember you were there.
Yeah, yeah,
Like
I
we
love
didn't
that.
really meet each other, but like I knew you were
Yeah,
there,
yeah.
and I remember you knocked out Zergirl in a best of one with the one base cheese or something like that.
The Cyclones, man, it was
Yeah,
crazy.
yeah, yeah. Like nobody expected you to win, but like my friend came around and told me it was like, bro, where did you just cheese out Zergirl? I'm like, no way, shut up. So like, uh, how is it like playing on the side like at these events as a cast? I guess that's one advantage of being at these events all the time. You can just throw your hat in if the time allows for it.
Yeah, that was a really cool event. I actually think that trip is one of like my in that event especially. I did like a big trip that involved like being away for 3 weeks, and that was like the start of
Oh,
it. And it was like that's like one of my best esports memories. Like it's such like a home felt kind of event. Everyone was like very chill, right? Like we weren't really there to work, but like we were, right? But like it was super chill, right? Sort of environment. It's cool to see some of the players there. We just had like such a good time. Like I don't know, like that event has such good memories for me, and yeah, I did not deserve to beat Zerko. I honestly went in, and
nonsense.
she let me. I'm pretty sure she let me play like the smallest map possible because she was just like, yeah, I'm just gonna roach rush him, and I'm just like, I
Oh
had no idea what I was doing. So I was like, I
no.
did like one base cyclones, and I'm just like, that's not even a build. There's never been a build, and I just killed it because I put like 6 SCVs with the cyclone and never died. I was like, this
Oh
is
my gosh.
disgusting. Um, but yeah, like I always enjoyed playing. I suck at being competitive though, man. Like nervous wreck, like very demotivated when I've got practice coming up. I'm starting to play Pokemon TCG, and
Oh, okay.
I actually go to an event this weekend,
Like
and
the
the close,
physical trading card
yeah,
game.
yeah, exactly. And the closer it gets, the less I want to practice because I'm like,
Oh.
the more time I put in practicing, if I go and fail, I'm like, man, that's such a letdown, right? Like, so I'm like stepping back from playing a lot, even though it's like getting to the point where I should be playing the most. I always had that struggle playing in StarCraft, and StarCraft's such an easy game to beat yourself up about.
Yes.
And I did that a lot. Like my mental state when I play StarCraft is horrendous, and I really don't play anymore because around that event was probably the best I'd ever been. I was like 5.4 on EU, like was probably
Whoa.
my peak, which was a very short-lived peak as well. But like I just had like a month where I could just play a lot. And then I went to like a couple of events and I had like decentish results. I was like, oh, I'll just keep playing. So I really had like a good streak. And since then, like I had to cast a bunch. I didn't play for like a month. And then when you go back, you know how it is in
Yeah.
StarCraft, like your
Yeah.
mechanics are just gone. So I just sucked. And I just can't get over that anymore.
It's
Like
such a
it,
sloth.
yeah, exactly. Like it's this horrible cycle of I'll finally have time to play, So I can play like 20 games and I don't enjoy it at all because I know what I'm dying to. It's almost like this sounds so like so vain, but it's like I know what I'm doing wrong. I know what I'm meant to be doing, and I just can't do it. Like I can't physically do it. I'm not good enough. And it's so frustrating because I know what I'm about to die to, and I know what I need to do. I just can't do any of it, right? And so to me, it's this horrible cycle of I'm not good enough, so I have to get through that. But getting through that is such a pain. And just by the time I'm like almost through, kind of working through some of the growing pains of getting back into it, I get busy and I can't play again. And this cycle like repeated. I went through this cycle for like a year or so. I just realized it was super unhealthy for me. I was like, I play StarCraft to improve. To me, that's the really fun part of it, improving or like learning more. And it was kind of like feeling like I was wasting my time because what I was doing wasn't like helping me with my casting either because I knew I just sucked at the mechanical parts of the game, right? Like I just had to grind, but I couldn't realistically grind and keep on playing enough to keep it going. I didn't have the time. So it's actually quite important for me to kind of break the cycle. Otherwise, I actually think I would would have been in a really bad place with SC2. So actually, I think stopping playing properly is something that really helped me kind of stay passionate about the game. But not in such a way where it's like I really believe as well you have to play a game to be able to cast it. But StarCraft's in that unique place where we've played tens of thousands of games at this point, right? Like the game's been out so long, so I don't feel like you suffer as much from not playing it anymore. I think is something that I've learned and I'm pretty happy to accept now, especially because StarCraft you can play for tens of thousands of hours and not learn anything else apart from you suck at macroing, you know? So,
It's true. It's true. Yeah. I've been having similar struggles. Like, my work requires me to travel, and
mhm,
it's like I'm not at home, sit next to the computer, and it's like, it's such an insane game to like upkeep.
mhm,
It's like it's almost like you can't play StarCraft. I mean, basically, you can't play StarCraft casually. Like, if you want to
yeah,
get good, you need to keep up with all the strategies, learn all the reactions, and it's like they're so specific, and learn all the scouting variations. It's brutal. It's
yeah,
brutal.
yeah. StarCraft's a horrendous game to play like part-time or casually.
Yeah.
That's why I think like the co-op commander stuff was like really good for the
Oh
game, but
yeah, yeah,
just
yeah, yeah.
way too late because that sort of stuff would have helped bridge a lot of gaps as well. So yeah, that's something which I think HRTSs could definitely do very well.
I don't know if you remember at that base trade TV event. Like, I didn't even want to go, but Penguin convinced me, and I played against Jon Snow, and like it was like one of the playoff matches or something, and
Uh-huh.
or it was it was like deciding the top eight, and I played him, and I took he took game one, but even in game one, like I had burrowed Banelings under his Hydras, and I didn't know about it, but like I could hear the audience screaming from inside the booth, and I'm like, something must be happening, but I didn't realize. And they told me afterwards, I was like, damn it. But then in the second game, he 12 pool Banelinged me and actually
Uh-huh.
held it and won. And then like I, Fear Dragon told me this afterwards, but he's just like, yeah, Maynard came up to me and was like, "Who's this midday guy?" And Fear Dragon was just like, "Oh, some asshole who just came out of nowhere decides to beat Jon Snow." I was like, "Thank you, Fear Dragon." I lost game three though, unfortunately, but
Uh,
it was fun. And then Silky destroyed me pretty hard
uh,
after that. He's crazy. Yeah, that was a fun event for me too. Um, so when it comes to like interacting, like people don't talk about this a lot in esports, but like part of the puzzle to succeeding is getting along with everybody else.
mhm.
And like, if people don't get along with you, you're not going to get called to gigs, et cetera, et cetera. So like, what have you noticed in your experience, not just in what you do, but what others do that helps them like get along, especially because online environment and gaming especially, it has a stigma for toxicity, right? So like,
Yeah.
how do you what advice do you have for people around that?
Yeah, it's an interesting one. The funny thing about StarCraft is it's like you're kind of such a tight-knit group to begin with, right? So it's just like I mean, there used to be all the memes of like the old boys club and stuff, right, as well, where it's like you had to be in the old boys club to get hired for anything, but like at the end of the day, like everyone's just good friends. Like, I think I could hang out with like any of the SC2 casters and just have like a good time all night. Um, and so it's very hard because like we don't really have drama in StarCraft either, right? Like we don't have that one like a-hole who like
We
like
used
not
to. We
anymore at
used
least.
to.
Yeah, we used to,
Yeah.
but like they would never be at events anyway, I suppose as well. And I guess that's kind of, or at least not like working events, I guess. So I guess that's like one of those things where it's like, especially because StarCraft 2, I guess, is a very old game. It always had like a group that was very friendly. And so as that group grew, I mean, a lot of people were like the old boys club, but like as people got brought onto cast, like that group's very friendly, very open. And I think it's very notable because like in StarCraft, one of the big differences as well is like you cast with everyone. You know, you don't go as like a pair to cast. Whereas in other esports, you cast as a duo. Like you get hired as a duo, and that's your duo partner you cast with. And oftentimes these guys don't even see the other talent in the event because they just come in for their match, and the other guys will have left because their match just ended or something, you know? And this boggled my mind. Like when I first worked an event that also had CS:GO at it, and they were like, "Oh yeah, we're working the second series tomorrow, so we just don't come in until like 4 p.m." And I'm like, "And you get paid a full day rate?" And they're like, "Yeah, of course." I'm like, "We're doing it wrong over in StarCraft, guys. Like they're showing up for half days." But I actually like it because then in StarCraft you have this tight group of friends because everyone works with each other, right? Then there's no like, oh, they got to do the finals or something like that duo, like they take all the gigs or anything like that because everyone knows they have to work together and we stick together and all of that. So I think it like stems from as well just having StarCraft be such an old game, so it's always had that core group of friends. And like I say, it's just sort of grown and bubbled out as new people got invited along. And I feel like it's very difficult to point out anyone that's caused issues. We've had a couple kind of wild cases more recently, and those guys managed to shoot themselves in the feet and kind of blow up their own careers a little bit. So
Recently, you mean?
yeah, and last year or so we had we had a little bit of drama of people who were like very potentially maybe going to start getting some more gigs, but they just went about it in a very wrong way, you know,
That
very
was like
abrasive
you're
and
talking about like casters who casted like the B streams or C streams of like
yeah,
big
yeah, and
events,
they
right?
started to get some mainstream opportunities, and then they wanted too much too quick, or like not even wanting too much too quick. Everyone wants more, right? Everyone wants
Right.
to get to the next level. But there's a way to go about that. Like when everyone's being like very friendly and helpful around you, the worst thing you can do is be like, yeah, that's great, but I already deserve to be there. I don't need your help. And so there was just a lot of like, it's one of those things where it's like, I think in StarCraft, you'll never get very far with that attitude because you need to get along with everyone. And we're not going to go to an event organizer and be like, don't hire this guy, right? If an event organizer asks us, hey, is there anyone you'd like to work with? Then you're not going to be on that list, you know? And that's a lot of what esports or StarCraft 2 is at least nowadays. And it's not us saying, hey, you have to invite this guy, or you can't invite this guy. It's just, you know, if we feel like someone's been putting in some good work and stuff, like we would recommend them, or, you know, if they're like, hey, we need an, you know, caster for this, or even for the B stream, you know, we give them our picks. And yeah, I just feel like there's definitely been more recently, I guess, a bit more drama around that. But then, yeah, for the most part, it's a non-issue because, yeah, I guess just be a nice person and you can just get on with people, I guess.
Is it ever stressful? And what I mean by that is like once you like people don't really realize this until they become bigger in esports, but like once you start having sponsors and being responsible for the image of certain
Mm.
things, you have to like make sure your behavior is very like, you know, for lack of a better term, PG and stuff like. Do you ever feel pressured in that regard?
No,
Like oh, I'm being watched or something.
I feel like the worst I can ever do is I really like to just hate on myself, I suppose. So like the worst thing I ever do is like talk myself down, right? And it especially just comes out when I'm playing. But, like sometimes like I guess the worst I get is like I get angry at like Twitch chat. Like chat's being dumb, right? You want to rage them, tell someone they're just stupid and tell them to shut up or something. So like I've definitely had those moments, but I think like some of my worst ones from back in the day, and there's some infamous clips apparently that the casters used to like watch all the time. This was like before I got hired for events, and apparently they'd watch like these couple of clips of me like completely raging at chat all the time. It's like this like you know funny clip like oh you see what Wardy did. It's just me like swearing at some guy in chat, being like you're trash man, you don't know what the hell you're saying, throwing out a bunch of expletives and stuff. It's like it's one of those things where it's like the worst thing you can do that like at the end of the day, the sponsors, I feel like sponsors in esports on streaming isn't don't really care so much about that because n- that stuff almost brings in views. So as long as you're not like really being like offensive, right, or like
Right.
you know doing something that's really like obviously like a no-go, because part of that's just the personality of streaming and like interacting, and that's what people like. Like it's a very real reaction as well. So there's like a line to kind of walk along, but I don't know. I feel like I'm a very undramatic streamer. Like nowadays, especially, the worst I do is tell someone in chat that they're an idiot, right? And like, you know, if someone wants to message a sponsor about that, you can go wild. They're not gonna care. So yeah, it's I don't know. Like, I feel like you can count on one hand. If you even need any fingers to count the amount of times StarCraft streamers have been banned on Twitch, right? And I feel like that's just like an idea of like StarCraft in
Yeah.
general. Like we have no drama. No one gets banned on Twitch. And like out in the rest of the Twitch universe, like there's people getting banned every day. People are like getting like all sorts of drama. So I feel like StarCraft's very unique in that way. So it's something I almost don't even have to think about, I suppose.
That's right. We're just so honorable.
We are, man. Like, what can I
Yeah.
say?
Oh, we are. Yeah, yeah, yeah. So we're running out of time here, but just to finish off, I'll ask you like a combination question. Just if you were one day to say like, "Hey, I don't want to do this anymore," what would you transition to, and how would start? Like, how would what you do, or like if what you do helps, how would it help? And the other question is, if you at some point like while trying to become where you are now, like if it didn't work out in some parallel universe, what would you have swapped to on the way?
It's a really good question. Like nowadays, especially, I feel like I'm established enough that I could really go into esports or something along those lines. And especially with what I do, it's not like I'm just like a street. Like, I feel like I do a lot of business stuff, right? Like I organize tournaments, I pay out players, I do all this admin work, right? I have a lot of experience there that I would say like not a lot of other streamers get. I mean, it depends what you do, right? Everyone has a very different experience streaming on Twitch. Everyone's channel is very different. I feel like my channels come with a lot of experience in organizing, planning, project management, and stuff like that. So a lot of skills that I've just naturally picked up over time. So I feel like I'd really enjoy doing stuff like tournament planning or organizing. Like I really, I mean, hate the stress of it, but like at the end of like an event, when like an event finishes and the stream goes offline, I sit back and I'm like, man, that felt good. Like we made something out of nothing. Yeah, we had some money, right? But like in theory, we had nothing. We slapped a name on it. We made a logo. We got some qualifiers. We organized some players. We got them here at the right time. People came and watched it. Like we made something. I feel like that's such a cool feeling that I'd love to go into. I guess in that sort of essence, like any sort of like project, product, maybe tournament management, that sort of line of work. I definitely feel like I'd probably do it along the line of esports nowadays or gaming because that's just why I have experience as well. So that would be my original thought. Um, yeah, but if I'd kind of dropped off along the way, it's hard to say because like I feel like one of the things I learned over time is I really do just like talking. Which is really funny because like way back when like I was not a talker, like I would mumble. I mean, you can go back and look at my very first YouTube video, and it's like this guy should not be allowed a microphone. It was horrendous. I couldn't talk, I couldn't pronounce things. I'm definitely not perfect. I'm definitely not the best speaker out there by a long shot. There's a lot of stuff I could improve on. But I definitely learned that I like sort of just talking and telling a story and that sort of vibe as well. I don't know what I could necessarily have done with that because those seem like the kind of jobs which are very limited and far between, but maybe something like I guess streaming really opened my eyes towards the other opportunities and the other things I could do. And so like I say, like maybe just along the way I would have been able to step out and then just use something like project management or so like along the way, but maybe less to do with esports because I just wouldn't have had the connections. Nowadays I feel like I would have the connections or at least the credentials to be able to at least be considered by some of these companies in those sort of positions. So
Right. All right. Well, just to finish off, I'll make a personal note. Doing all these interviews, I've started to notice a trend with people, whether they start with grassroots or they're seemingly, came from big news, but everybody seems to have the same sort of theme where it's like they got lucky or fortunate through some sort of happenstance, but really the luck is sort of like I guess in this case you could almost call it an ugly word to describe all the hard work that was put in
mm,
beforehand. People really putting themselves out there, and sure they just got happened to be picked up by something, but would that have happened if they didn't put in all that work before? Like definitely not, right? So
hmm.
I guess that's why they call it, their big break or what have you. But just thought I'd put that out there. Anyways, thank you so much for your time, Wordy. It was awesome to get to interview, and I will catch you later and probably see you on RuneScape pretty soon.
Yeah, thanks for having me, man. It was a pleasure.
No problem. Catch you later.
Yeah.